The slap didn't sting half as much as the silence that followed. Standing over the holiday roast, my husband screamed that I had given him a disease, his voice shaking the crystal glasses. My family gasped, waiting for me to crumble in shame. But I saw the text notification light up his phone on the table. It wasn't an outburst. It was a signal. They thought this was the end of my life. But I knew it was just opening night. My name is Brianna Hayes, and at 33 years old, I thought I knew exactly what a perfect Christmas looked like. I was standing in the dining room of my parents' house in Silver Ridge, Pennsylvania, smoothing the tablecloth while the scent of roasted turkey and pine needles filled the air. It was the kind of atmosphere that felt manufactured for a greeting card, warm and suffocatingly flawless. The candles flickered against the crystal wine glasses, casting long, dancing shadows that should have warned me, but I was too busy playing the dutiful daughter and the loving wife to notice the blade hanging over my neck. My husband, Evan Caldwell, arrived 40 minutes late. He did not apologize. He walked in with the energy of a man marching to a sentencing hearing, his jaw tight and his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit or a camera. He barely touched me when I leaned in for a kiss. Instead, he kept checking his phone, sliding it in and out of his pocket with a nervous tick that made my stomach turn. Across the table, my mother-in-law, Marjorie Caldwell, sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. She offered me a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her gaze fixed on her son like a conductor waiting for the first note of a symphony. She was counting the seconds. I just didn't know what for. My father stood up to offer a toast, raising his glass of vintage red wine. That was the cue. Before my father could speak a word, Evan's hand shot out and clamped around my wrist. His grip was bruising, painful enough to make me gasp. He yanked me up from my chair, the legs of the wood scraping violently against the floorboards. "You think you can just sit here?" Evan shouted, his voice cracking with a performance of rage so intense it felt rehearsed. "You think you can sit here and smile at my mother after what you did, Evan? You're hurting me," I stammered, trying to pull my arm back. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me," he screamed, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. I went to the doctor. "Brianna, I know what you gave me. You gave me an STD. You went out and brought filth into our marriage, and now you've infected me." The room died. My mother dropped her napkin. My father stood frozen with his glass still raised. The silence was absolute, a vacuum sucking the air out of the room. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to ask him if he had lost his mind, but I never got the chance. Evan's hand left my wrist and struck my face. It wasn't a shove. It was a slap, hard and deliberate, the sound cracking through the room like a coffin lid slamming shut. My head snapped to the side, my cheek burning as if he had branded me with a hot iron. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer shock of the violence. This was Christmas. This was my parents' house, and my husband had just put me on trial. Marjorie did not gasp. She did not rush to help me. She stood up slowly, her face twisting into a mask of tragic disappointment. "Oh, Evan," Marjorie wailed, though her eyes remained dry and sharp. "My poor boy. We have to think about the family honor now. We have to look at the medical truth. How could you? Brianna a traitor in our own home." I pressed a hand to my stinging cheek and looked around the table. My parents were paralyzed by confusion and horror, but as my gaze swept past the centerpiece, I locked eyes with my cousin Cole. He was a network technician, a guy who lived his life behind screens. And usually, he was the most awkward person in the room. But tonight, he wasn't shocked. He was staring at his plate, chewing slowly, his shoulders hunched. He didn't look surprised. He looked like someone who had read the spoilers before the movie started. I backed away from the table. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but a strange, icy clarity was beginning to settle over my brain. Evan hadn't asked me if I cheated. He hadn't asked for an explanation. He had announced a verdict. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a scene from a script. I need a moment, I whispered, my voice trembling just enough to satisfy them. I turned and walked into the kitchen, away from their staring eyes. Evan had left his phone on the granite island when he stormed in to pour himself a drink earlier. The screen lit up with a notification. I didn't mean to look, but survival instinct is faster than politeness. The message was from a contact saved only as Mem. Done. Family saw it. I stared at the glowing letters until the screen went black. The burn on my cheek was still hot, but my blood turned to ice. They wanted me to scream. They wanted me to beg for forgiveness for a sin I hadn't committed. They expected Brianna Hayes to collapse under the weight of their humiliation. I took a breath, steadying my shaking hands. I would not cry. I would not scream. I would go back out there and let them believe they had broken me. They thought the show was over, but they had no idea I was just waiting for my turn to control the lights. The morning sun did not bring warmth. It brought a sterile, exposing light that made the previous night's horror feel surgical. Evan was gone when I woke up. He had not slept in our bed. Instead, my phone buzzed at 8 in the morning with a text message that read more like a subpoena than a communication from a husband. He told me I had to go to a specific clinic, one his mother had chosen, and I was required to sign a HIPAA release form granting his entire family access to my results. He said it was the only way to begin rebuilding trust. I walked into the kitchen to find my mother on the landline, her face pale and drawn. She was listening to Marjorie, even from across the room. I could hear my mother-in-law's voice, shrill and weeping. "We just want to protect Evan," Marjorie sobbed through the speaker. "You have to understand. We need the full 10-panel screen, specifically the PCR test for reliability. The results take 48 hours, and we need to be sure before the holidays end." My mother made soothing noises, but I froze. Marjorie was a retired librarian. She spoke about specific pathology tests and turnaround times with the precision of a lab technician. It felt rehearsed. It felt wrong. I waited until my mother hung up and went into the garden to cry. I did not follow her. Instead, I went to the coat rack where Evan had left his trench coat the night before in his theatrical exit. I was not looking for perfume or lipstick stains. I was looking for intel. My hand slid into the inner lining pocket, fingers brushing against a crumpled piece of thermal paper. I pulled it out. It was a receipt for a medical center, the exact same clinic Marjorie was forcing me to visit, but the date was from 3 weeks ago. I stared at the itemized list. Evan had paid for a comprehensive STI panel and a consultation. He didn't discover a symptom yesterday. He had been planning this diagnosis for nearly a month. I shoved the receipt into my pocket just as I remembered the loose floorboard in the pantry where we used to hide spare keys. I had seen Evan fiddling there 2 days ago. I knelt and pried it open, expecting to find nothing, but there was a thick, cream-colored envelope tucked into the insulation. It was addressed to me, from the law office representing my aunt, Dahlia Rourke. I met Dahlia an hour later at a diner 2 towns over. She looked at my bruised cheek and did not ask a single question. She simply slid a file across the table. "Your uncle passed away 4 months ago," Dahlia said, her voice low and steady. "Everyone thought the assets were liquidated. They weren't. He left the controlling interest in Hawthorne Biomed Systems to you. That is 51% of the shares. Brianna, the current valuation is over $20 million. The air left my lungs. 20 million, I choked out. But there is a catch," Dahlia continued, tapping a clause on the 3rd page. "You have to maintain a clean record of conduct for 60 days before the transfer is finalized. If you are involved in a public scandal, or if you are deemed mentally or morally unfit to lead, the shares go into a trust managed by the minority stakeholders. Silence is armor, Brianna. You tell no one." The puzzle pieces slammed together with violent force. The slap, the public accusation, the demand for medical records. This wasn't about a disease. It was a dirty, legal execution. They were trying to paint me as unstable, promiscuous, and infected so they could argue I was unfit to inherit the company. Marjorie and Evan didn't care about my fidelity. They cared about the voting rights. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I needed backup. I called Marin Cole, my best friend and an investigative journalist who lived for digging up rot. I need a ghost protocol. I told her when she picked up. Encrypted email, a secure hard drive. I need to disappear while standing right in front of them. I'm on it, Marin said, her voice dropping to a whisper. If they are playing for 8 figures, Brianna, they won't stop at a slap. Watch your back. I returned to the house, forcing my face into a mask of submission. I picked up the family iPad on the kitchen counter, pretending to check a recipe. I navigated to the shared calendar. It looked normal at first glance, filled with holiday parties and church services. But then I toggled the view to show hidden layers. There, scheduled for the day after Christmas, was a blocked-out event. The location was hidden, but the title chilled me to the bone. Redemption meeting. They had a schedule for my destruction. I deleted the browser history, set the iPad down, and smiled at my mother as she walked in. I was going to attend that meeting, but I wouldn't be the one seeking redemption. At 2:41 in the morning, the house was a tomb of silence, broken only by the rhythmic humming of the refrigerator and the aggressive vibration of a tablet on the granite countertop. I had crept downstairs for water, my throat dry from the phantom sensation of Evan's hands around my wrist. But the glowing screen stopped me cold. It was Marjorie's iPad. It lit up the dark kitchen with a spectral blue hue, buzzing repeatedly with incoming notifications. I approached it like it was a bomb. Marjorie was a woman of meticulous control, yet she had left her digital life exposed. I swiped the screen. There was no passcode. Her arrogance was my key. She assumed she was the warden and I was just the prisoner. And wardens do not lock their doors against inmates they have already broken. The notifications were coming from a group chat app I had never seen her use. The group name was typed in bold capital letters, Project Purify. The profile picture was a single white orchid, Marjorie's signature flower, the symbol of flawless, suffocating perfection. My fingers hovered over the glass, trembling slightly, but I forced them to tap the icon, the chat history unspooled before my eyes. A timeline of my destruction. A message pinned to the top of the chat, dated 2 weeks ago. Read Christmas is the stage. Make her family believe she is dirty before papers are signed. If they pity her, we lose. They must be disgusted. I scrolled down, my breath catching in my throat. It was a military operation. They had outlined phases. Phase 1 was labeled biological warfare, which detailed the STD accusation. Phase 2 was legal submission, listing the pressure to sign a power of attorney and a sweeping medical release form. Phase 3 was simply titled Replacement. Next to it was a contact card for Lena Kingsley, Evan's ex-girlfriend from college, the woman he had sworn he hadn't spoken to in a decade. A new message popped up from a user named Miles Denton. I recognized the name immediately. He was the family lawyer, the man who handled parking tickets and zoning issues. But the document he had just attached was not a standard legal form. It was a draft for a power of attorney, but the text highlighted in the preview was specific. It granted the designated agent the immediate right to vote on corporate shares and manage business assets. This is too specific. Miles had typed, but necessary. We need the voting rights by the end of the month. Then came a message from E, my husband. She will sign. Evan wrote, She is terrified. She fears being called sick more than she fears losing money. I have her right where we want her. I felt bile rise in my throat. He wasn't angry. He wasn't heartbroken. He was banking on my fear. Another number, unsaved, chimed in with a ruthlessness that made my skin crawl. If she does not sign within 48 hours, we trigger the contingency. I will file the anonymous report for termination for cause at Meridian. We cut off her income, and she will sign anything to stay afloat. My thumb hovered over the power and volume buttons to take a screenshot, but my hand froze. A warning flashed in my mind. Marjorie's devices were all synced to the family cloud. If I took a screenshot, the image would appear on her phone upstairs and Evan's laptop instantly. I would be caught. I released the buttons and reached into my pajama pocket for my burner phone, the one Maureen had made me buy hours ago. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to still. I opened the camera app and began snapping photos of the screen. Click. The pinned message. Click. The phases. Click. The lawyer's draft. Click. Evan's betrayal. I captured every timestamp, every name, every disgusting word. I was about to lock the iPad when one final message scrolled into view, stopping my heart. Reminder, do not let Brianna know about Hawthorne. If she finds out the value before she signs the proxy, the price of her silence goes up. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. A cold smile touched my lips for the first time in 24 hours. They knew about the company. They knew exactly what I had inherited. But they made one fatal calculation error. They thought I was still in the dark. They thought they were stealing from a blind woman, unaware that I had just opened my eyes. The meeting with Human Resources was not a conversation. It was an execution disguised as a procedure. By 9 a.m. on the Monday following Christmas, I was sitting in a glass-walled office at Meridian Governance Solutions, staring across a sleek mahogany desk at the director of HR. She slid a single sheet of paper toward me, her face composed into a mask of professional regret. We received an anonymous tip regarding a significant breach of client data, she said, her voice devoid of warmth. The logs indicate that sensitive files were accessed and downloaded from your account. The IP address matches your home network. Brianna. I looked at the timestamp. It was from the night before Christmas Eve, exactly when I had been asleep and Evan had been downstairs finishing up some emails. The timeline from the iPad chat was unfolding with terrifying precision. This was the contingency plan they had threatened cut off her income. I am placing you on immediate unpaid suspension pending an internal investigation, the director continued, extending a hand. I need your laptop and your badge. It is just protocol until we clear this up. She expected tears. She expected me to beg for my job or shout about my tenure. Instead, I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the table to hide the tremor in my fingers. If you check the access logs, I said, my voice eerily calm, you will see the IP matches my house. But I want you to pull the MAC address and the specific device ID of the machine that initiated the download. It will not match my work laptop. It will match a personal device not registered to me. The director blinked, her rehearsed speech stalling. That is a level of forensic detail we haven't looked into yet. Do it, I said, and document that I requested it. I walked out of the building with a cardboard box of my personal effects, feeling the weight of the invisible noose tightening. But as soon as I reached my car, my phone buzzed. It was Marin. I found the link. Marin said, breathless. Lena Kingsley isn't just Evan's college ex. She is currently the director of public relations for North Pine Capital, Brianna. North Pine has been trying to acquire Hawthorne Biomed for 6 months. Your uncle refused to sell. My blood ran cold. I called Dahlia immediately. Let me guess, I said as soon as she answered. Miles Denton, the family lawyer pushing the paperwork. Does he have a relationship with North Pine? I just pulled his conflict check, Dahlia confirmed, sounding grim. He is their external counsel for mergers and acquisitions. This isn't a divorce strategy, Brianna. It is a corporate raid. They are using the STD scandal to force you to sign over voting rights to Evan, who will then sell the company to North Pine for a fraction of its value. I drove home with a new kind of fear. It wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about $20 million and a legacy they were trying to steal. When I got back to the house, it was empty. I went to the kitchen and pulled a jar of dried oregano from the spice rack. I emptied half of it and nestled a tiny motion-activated camera inside, positioning it to face the kitchen island where the iPad usually sat. I set up a burner phone under the sofa in the living room, set to record audio. Evan came home at 6. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped in a performance of the weary, betrayed husband. He placed a stack of documents on the counter, the power of attorney and the medical release forms. "I don't want to fight, Brianna," he said softly, looking at me with eyes that seemed almost genuine. "I just want the truth. My mother, she is just worried. If you sign these, we can handle this privately. We can save your reputation. I just want to know you are safe." I looked at the papers. The truth he wanted was my signature, which would effectively hand him the keys to Hawthorne Biomed. I let my shoulders drop. I forced my lip to tremble. "I can't take this anymore. Evan," I whispered, looking down at the floor. "I lost my job today." "Did you know that they suspended me?" "Oh, honey," he said, stepping closer but not touching me. "That is terrible. See, it is all spiraling. Just sign the papers. Let me take care of everything." I looked up at him, tears welling in my eyes that were born of pure rage. I need to sleep," I stammered. "I will sign them tomorrow morning. I promise. Just let me sleep." "Okay," Evan said, a flash of victory crossing his face before he smoothed it back into concern. "Tomorrow." He thought I was surrendering. He didn't know I was just buying time to sharpen the knife. Marjorie called it a healing brunch, a phrase that sounded delicate but felt like a bear trap. She had set the table on the patio, inviting not just Evan and me, but my parents, my Aunt Dahlia, and a few cousins. It was a public tribunal disguised as egg salad and mimosas. The winter air was crisp, but the atmosphere at the table was heavy with judgment. Everyone was walking on eggshells, waiting for the woman who had supposedly infected her husband to crumble. Marjorie approached me with a steaming mug, her smile tight and predatory. "Here, Brianna," she cooed, placing the cup in front of me. "It is a special herbal blend for anxiety. You look like you are about to shatter. Drink it. It will stop the shaking." She wanted me sedated. She wanted me compliant. I looked at the dark liquid and felt a wave of nausea. I waited until she turned her back to greet my mother. Then I slid the mug across the table to my cousin Cole, swapping it with his empty water glass. "I think I took yours," I murmured. Cole, who usually had his nose buried in a gaming console, took a sip. His eyes widened immediately. He didn't swallow. He turned his head and spat the liquid discreetly into the potted fern behind him. He looked at me, his eyes sharp with a sudden realization. "Don't drink anything she gives you," Cole whispered, leaning in under the pretense of grabbing a napkin. "And Brianna." I checked the server logs for the doorbell camera at Mom and Dad's house, the footage of him hitting you. It wasn't deleted fast enough. I have it. 4K resolution. I can see the sweat on his face. My heart skipped a beat. I had the weapon. I just needed the right moment to fire it. Marjorie clapped her hands to gather everyone's attention. She pulled a folder from her tote bag, the medical release form again. "We need to move past this ugliness," Marjorie announced, her voice trembling with staged emotion. "Brianna, dear, just sign the release. I can take it to the specialist myself. We can get this sorted out and maybe save this marriage. Don't you want to prove you are healthy?" Evan stood up then. He looked ravaged, dark circles painted under his eyes by either sleeplessness or makeup. "I am sorry I lost my temper on Christmas," Evan said, looking at my father. "I shouldn't have hit her. But the doctor was so clear. I am positive. And I have been faithful. I don't know. I don't know what she did or who she was with, but how can I trust her? He was burying me. He was apologizing for the violence while reinforcing the lie that justified it." My mother looked at me with tears in her eyes. silently begging me to sign the paper and end the shame. Then, the patio door opened. Marjorie's face lit up. "Oh, look who it is," she exclaimed. "Lena. I didn't think you could make it." Lena Kingsley walked in, looking like a magazine cutout of corporate success. She was wearing a white coat, pristine and sharp. She wasn't just a guest, she was the contrast. The clean replacement. "I hope I am not interrupting," Lena said, her voice smooth as silk. She glanced at me with a pity that felt like acid. "Marjorie told me about the situation. It is so hard these days to find people who value cleanliness and dignity. A woman's reputation is so fragile, isn't it?" The audacity took my breath away. They were parading his mistress in front of me at a family brunch, framing her as the virtuous alternative while I sat there labeled as damaged goods. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the stone patio. "Where are you going?" Marjorie snapped, her mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "We aren't finished." "I am," I said. I picked up my purse and looked directly at Evan. The table went silent. "I have just one question." "Evan," I said, my voice cutting through the garden chatter. "If you are so sure you caught this disease from me, and if you only found out on Christmas Eve, why is the receipt for your STI test dated 3 weeks ago?" Evan froze. His fork hovered halfway to his mouth. Marjorie's eyes widened, darting between her son and me. The silence that followed wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a bomb that had just stopped ticking. Evan stammered, his face draining of color. I just... "Enjoy the brunch," I said. I turned and walked away, feeling their eyes burning into my back. I didn't run. I walked with the steady, rhythmic click of my heels on the pavement, leaving them to choke on the truth I had just served. I agreed to the test, but I demanded a strict chain of custody. I told Evan I would go, and he looked smug, thinking I was walking right into the slaughterhouse his mother had built. I got in my car and drove toward the clinic Marjorie had insisted upon, the one with the polished marble floors and the staff that smiled too much. But a block away, I swerved into the left lane and sped past it. I drove 20 minutes south to a forensic laboratory that handled court-ordered screenings, a place where samples were sealed with tamper-proof tape, and every technician signed their name on the vial. My phone rang before I even parked. It was Marjorie, Brianna. "Where are you?" she demanded, her voice tight. "The receptionist said you never checked in. They are waiting for you." I decided to go to a certified independent lab, I said, checking my rearview mirror to make sure I wasn't being followed. "It is better for legal purposes." "Marjorie, unbiased results." You cannot do that," she shrieked, the mask of the concerned matriarch shattering completely. "We need Dr. Halloway. He knows the family history. You come back here right now, or—" I hung up. Her desperation confirmed everything. They didn't need a test. They needed a result they could control. I sat in the sterile white room of the independent lab while the phlebotomist drew 3 vials of blood. I made him sign the seal in front of me. I took a photo of the serial numbers. 36 hours later, I sat across from Dr. Eris. He held a single sheet of paper. "You are negative." "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, sliding the report across the desk. "Negative for everything. HIV, syphilis, chlamydia, gonorrhea. The full panel is clear." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since Christmas. "But my husband? He claims he has symptoms. He claims he tested positive." Dr. Eris frowned, tapping his pen against the desk. "If your husband is symptomatic and positive for a bacterial infection, and you are negative, then, biologically speaking, you could not have been the vector. Given the incubation periods, if you had given it to him, you would show antibodies or active infection. If he has it, and you don't, He contracted it from a source he encountered recently. Very recently. The science was the final nail. Evan wasn't just lying about me giving it to him. He was likely infected by the very person he was using to replace me. I walked out to my car and called Marin. "I got it," she said, her voice crackling with adrenaline. I hacked the security feed of the parking lot at Marjorie's clinic. Guess who walked out of there together 3 weeks ago? "Looking very cozy, Evan and Lena," I said, not even asking. "Evan and Lena," she confirmed. "And Brianna?" "Dahlia just texted me the corporate filings. That clinic isn't just a family favorite. It is owned by a shell company called Vestige Holdings. Vestige is a subsidiary of North Pine Capital. The same people trying to buy your company own the doctor who diagnosed your husband. It was a closed loop. They had manufactured a medical crisis to force a financial surrender." I drove home and locked the door to my home office. I began to assemble the kill shot. I uploaded the video file of the slap from Cole. I synced the screenshots of the Project Purify group chat. I scanned my negative test results with the forensic seal visible. I added the IT logs from my router that proved the unauthorized access. Then, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to the CEO of Meridian Governance Solutions. I didn't write it as a suspended employee. I wrote it as a whistleblower. Subject internal security breach and forensic tampering, jar case ID 9942. Attached is proof that the unauthorized download was initiated by a device not registered to me, operating within my home network during hours I was asleep. I am requesting a full forensic audit of the device ID ending in 4F2, which you will find belongs to a Mr. Evan Caldwell. This was not negligence. It was a frame-up involving corporate espionage. I hit send. My finger hovered over my phone. I needed to get them all in one room. I needed the audience. I typed a message to Evan. I got the results. They are overwhelming. I am ready to talk. "Please, let's do it on New Year's Eve at the family party. I want to apologize to everyone at once." It took 3 seconds for him to reply. "I am glad you are finally being sensible. Brianna, we will fix this." I stared at the phone. He thought I was coming to surrender. He had no idea I was coming to burn the house down. The chandeliers in the grand ballroom of the eccentric Silver Ridge Country Club were bright enough to induce a migraine, casting a diamond-hard glare over the 300 guests Marjorie had assembled. This was not just a New Year's Eve party. It was a coronation. Marjorie had styled it as a fresh start gala, a thinly veiled celebration of my public submission. The air smelled of expensive perfume and anticipation. They were all waiting for the moment the sick wife would sign the papers in the back room and fade into obscurity, leaving the family honor and the family company intact. I wore a pale gray dress that washed me out. My hair pinned back simply. I looked exactly like the broken, humiliated woman they expected. Evan stood by the champagne tower, looking dashing and relieved. He squeezed my shoulder, a gesture that looked supportive to the crowd but felt like a shackle to me. "Just get through the speech," Evan whispered, his breath smelling of scotch. "Then we sign the NDA in the library, and it will all be over." "Yes," I whispered back, keeping my eyes on the floor. "It will be." I scanned the room until I saw a photographer with a hat pulled low over her eyes near the audiovisual booth. It was Marin. She gave me a microscopic nod. She had bypassed the club's system and was hardwired directly into the main projector. 10 minutes before midnight, the music faded. Marjorie stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone with a manicured nail. "Family, friends." Marjorie beamed, her voice trembling with manufactured grace. "This year has tested us. But we believe in forgiveness. We believe in healing. My daughter-in-law, Brianna, has something she wants to say to clear the air before the ball drops." She beckoned me up. The walk to the stage felt like walking to the gallows, but my pulse was steady. I took the microphone. My hand shook intentionally. I stammered, looking out at the sea of faces my parents, Evan's colleagues, the town elite. I want to apologize. Marjorie nodded encouragingly from the side, practically salivating. I am sorry. I continued, my voice gaining a sudden razor-sharp clarity. That I spent 7 years trusting a family of predators. Marjorie's smile faltered before she could move. The massive projection screen behind me, which had been displaying a countdown clock, went black. A second later, it exploded with sound and motion. The video was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. It was the footage from the doorbell camera. Evan's face was twisted in rage. The sound of the slap, that wet, violent crack, echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. The audience gasped as one living organism. On screen, Evan screamed about the disease. Then, the slide changed. Project Purify. The screen read in bold letters. It was a screenshot of the group chat. The profile pictures were clearly visible. Marjorie, Evan, Miles Denton, Lena Kingsley. Phase 1, Biological Warfare. I read aloud, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Phase 2, Legal Submission. Phase 3, Replacement? Turn it off, Marjorie shrieked, lunging for the AV booth, but the slide changed again. This time, it was a side-by-side comparison. On the left, my medical report from the independent forensic lab. Negative, all panels. On the right, the receipt for Evan's STI treatment dated 3 weeks prior to his accusation. If I gave him the disease, I said, looking directly at Evan, who stood frozen near the stage, then I would have it. But I don't. I am completely clean, which means the infection didn't come from the marriage bed, it came from outside. A photo appeared on the screen, Evan and Lena walking out of the clinic together, heads close, conspiratorial and intimate. Lies, Evan screamed, his face turning a shade of purple I had never seen. She is lying. She is crazy. And finally, I said, signaling Marin for the kill shot. The screen displayed the single text message Evan had received seconds after hitting me. Done. Family saw it. That slap wasn't a loss of control. Evan, I said into the microphone, my voice cold as liquid nitrogen. It was a performance review. Marjorie screamed something unintelligible and ran toward me, her hands hooked into claws. Evan vaulted onto the stage, his eyes wild with panic and violence. Shut it down, Evan roared, reaching for me. Give me that mic. But he never reached me. 3 large men in dark suits stepped out from the wing's security guards Cole had hired hours ago. They intercepted Evan mid-stride, blocking him with the solidity of a brick wall. Another guard gently restrained Marjorie as she tried to claw her way to the projector. The ballroom was in chaos. Phones were out, recording everything. My parents stood in the front row, their mouths open, the horror of the truth finally sinking in. I looked at Evan, struggling against the guard, his tuxedo rumpled, his dignity shredded. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just dropped the microphone on the stage floor. The feedback screech was the only sound loud enough to cut through the ruin of their reputation. The silence of the ballroom was replaced instantly by the deafening roar of the digital world. By 3 a.m, the video of the slap had been shared 40,000 times. The narrative had shifted violently. People were no longer whispering about an infected wife, but screaming about a domestic conspiracy. My phone was a brick of notifications, vibrating so constantly it felt like a living thing. I listened to a voicemail from Marjorie, her voice cracking not with sorrow, but with the screeching panic of a cornered animal. You are a sick, psychotic liar. Brianna, she screamed through the speaker. You doctored those videos. You think anyone will believe a woman who has lost her mind. I will sue you for slander. I will take everything I deleted the message without saving it. I didn't need her threats. I had her confession. By the next afternoon, the tide at my workplace turned. The CEO of Meridian Governance Solutions contacted me personally. The tone was no longer accusatory. "We have had our external security consultants review the logs you sent," he said, sounding deeply uncomfortable. "It appears there was indeed an internal breach originating from a device that spoofed your credentials. We are treating this as a targeted attack on an employee. Your suspension is lifted immediately. Brianna, they were scared of a lawsuit. I told them I would consider my return after my legal counsel reviewed their security protocols. Then came the sharks. A courier delivered a thick envelope from North Pine Capital. It wasn't an apology, it was a purchase offer. They offered to buy my majority stake in Hawthorne Biomed for $8 a share, less than a third of its value. The cover letter was dripped in condescension, suggesting that they were doing me a favor by liquidating my assets to help me navigate this difficult personal scandal. Evan called an hour later. He sounded exhausted, his voice devoid of the theatrical rage he had displayed on stage. "Can we just stop?" Evan asked, sounding like a man who just wanted to go to sleep. "I am willing to offer a settlement. We do a mutual NDA. I issue a statement saying the medical thing was a misunderstanding, and we file for divorce based on irreconcilable differences. No fault. Clean break." I gripped the phone tight. "Mutual NDA misunderstanding. It protects us both," he said quickly. Too quickly. "We include a non-disparagement clause with liquidated damages of $50,000 per breach." I hung up. Evan didn't know what liquidated damages meant. He was reading a script Miles Denton had written for him. Then, my burner phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. "They are going to cut me loose. I am the scapegoat. Meet me at the cargo lot behind the old mall. Alone." It was Lena. I found her sitting in her car, chain-smoking, her perfect hair pulled back into a messy bun. She looked terrified. "North Pine is pulling the plug," Lena said, her hands shaking as she lit another cigarette. The deal was simple. I help them get the company. They give me a VP role and bury a DUI charge I got 3 years ago. If I don't help, they leak the mugshot and my career is over. But now, after that video, they are going to say I was the mastermind and Evan was the victim. She reached into her back seat and handed me a heavy file folder. "I am not going down for them," she hissed. "Here." I opened the folder. It was a treasure trove. There was a branding strategy document outlining the public image of Evan and Lena as the new power couple of Hawthorne Biomed. There were emails from Miles Denton explicitly discussing how to draft the power of attorney to bypass my consent. And there was a USB drive. "What is this?" I asked. "A recording," Lena said, staring out the windshield. "Marjorie called me the day before Christmas. She told me to make sure Evan hit you where it would hurt the most. Target her shame," she said. "A woman who feels dirty will sign anything." I took the evidence to Dahlia immediately. My aunt looked at the documents with the cold satisfaction of a general seeing the enemy expose their flank. "This is enough for an emergency injunction," Dahlia said, already typing. "We can freeze every asset connected to the shell company and block any transfer of Hawthorne shares. We will starve them out." Just as Dahlia filed the paperwork, my main phone rang. It was the executive secretary for Reed Larkin, the senior partner at North Pine. "Mr. Larkin would like to meet with you privately," the secretary said. Her voice clipped. "He believes a face-to-face discussion at the Ritz-Carlton suite could resolve the misunderstandings regarding your shares. Tonight at 8, they thought I was panicked. They thought the pressure was working and that I was coming to sell the company just to make the noise stop. Tell Mr. Larkin I will be there." I said. I hung up and looked at Dahlia. I wasn't going there to sell. I was going there to let them know that the price of my silence was something they could not afford. The executive suite at the Ritz-Carlton smelled of old leather and aggressive negotiation. I walked in, flanked by Dahlia and Gavin Holt, a forensic accountant who I had introduced simply as my financial advisor. Reed Larkin, the senior partner at North Pine Capital, sat on a velvet sofa with the relaxed posture of a man who thought he was about to buy a distressed asset for pennies on the dollar. I sat down opposite him and placed a digital voice recorder on the coffee table between us. I pressed the red button. The light blinked steadily. For our mutual protection, I said, my voice level. Since we are discussing high-value assets, Reed chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. He slid a thick stack of documents across the glass surface. On top was a voting proxy agreement. Straight to business, then, Reed said, tapping the paper. This authorizes North Pine to vote your shares in the upcoming board meeting. The second document is the purchase agreement. We are prepared to offer you $8 a share. It is generous, considering the circumstances. Generous, Dahlia asked, arching an eyebrow. That is a third of the market value. Market value is for companies not led by CEOs in the middle of a public meltdown, Reed countered, his eyes fixing on me with a faux sympathy that made my skin crawl. Look at you, Brianna. You are trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. Sign the proxy tonight. If you do, we make it all go away. We have friends in media. We can kill the story about the STD. We can make human resources at Meridian drop the investigation permanently. The room went deadly quiet. I glanced at Dahlia. She leaned forward, her pen hovering over her notebook. I want to be very clear about this, Dahlia said slowly. Are you stating that the suppression of the human resources investigation and the negative press is conditional on her signing over the voting rights? Reed shrugged, arrogant in his safety. I am saying we offer solutions. Your mother-in-law, Marjorie, she promised me you would be softer after New Year's. She said the pressure would bring you to your senses. We are just executing the plan. He had just admitted to the conspiracy. He confirmed that Marjorie was working on his timeline. And if I don't sign, I asked softly. Reed's expression hardened. He leaned in, dropping the facade of the benevolent savior. Then we release the medical file. He said, the one from the clinic. We have the doctor's notes. Brianna, we can make the world believe whatever we want about your health. You will be toxic, unemployable. I looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel a trace of fear. I felt the cold, hard weight of ammunition. I reached into my bag, but I didn't pull out a pen. I pulled out a single sheet of paper titled, Notice to Preserve Evidence. I placed it gently on top of his purchase agreement. I am not signing anything. Mr. Larkin, I said. But you are. You are going to sign for receipt of this notice. We are filing a lawsuit tomorrow morning for extortion, corporate collusion, and conspiracy to commit domestic abuse. Reed laughed, but it sounded nervous. You have nothing. You have a recording of a negotiation. Actually, Gavin spoke up for the first time, opening his laptop and turning the screen toward Reed. We have the money trail. I traced the funding for the clinic your husband visited. It is owned by Vestige Holdings, which is a shell company fully owned by North Pine Capital. You didn't just buy the company. Mr. Larkin, you bought the diagnosis. You funded the fake medical evidence used to blackmail a majority shareholder. Reed's face turned the color of ash. He looked from the screen to me, realizing the trap had snapped shut. This is a misunderstanding, Reed stammered, standing up. You were just trying to steal $20 million. I cut him off. And you used my marriage as the weapon. I stood up and picked up the recorder. I will see you in court, I said. And Reed tell. Evan, I am coming for the rest of it. I walked out of the suite without looking back. I had their confession. I had the financial link. I had the leverage. The negotiation was over. The war was just beginning. The boardroom at Hawthorne Biomed Systems was a fortress of glass and steel, a fitting arena for the final execution. I stood at the head of the long mahogany table, flanked by Dahlia and the surviving members of the board. I placed the certified deed on the table. As of 9 o'clock this morning, I announced, my voice echoing off the glass walls, I have formally claimed my inheritance. I control 51% of the voting shares, effective immediately. I am freezing all external transfers and revoking all prior proxy authorizations. The doors to the conference room burst open. Evan and Marjorie rushed in, breathless and disheveled, trailed by a frantic receptionist. Marjorie looked like a woman on the verge of a stroke. "She is incompetent," Marjorie shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "We are filing for emergency guardianship. She is mentally unstable and she is being manipulated." Dahlia stepped forward, sliding a thick file across the polished table toward the company secretary. "Actually," Dahlia said, her voice dry as dust, "we are filing a criminal complaint. This folder contains evidence of extortion, blackmail, and the falsification of medical records used to coerce a shareholder." Before Evan could speak, I threw the report from Meridian Governance Solutions onto the pile. "And this," I said, looking Evan dead in the eye, "is the forensic report from my employer. It proves that the data breach in my home network originated from a device with a MAC address registered to you. Evan, you didn't just frame your wife, you hacked a federal contractor. The FBI is very interested in that part." The color drained from Evan's face. The ambush in the boardroom was over, but the funeral for their scheme continued in the courtroom 48 hours later. During the hearing for the permanent protection order, the courtroom was silent as the video of the Christmas slap played on the monitors. The judge watched Evan strike me, his face twisted in performative rage. But the real blow came when my cousin Cole approached the bench. "Your Honor," Cole said, holding up a USB drive, "I have enhanced audio from the 30 seconds preceding the assault." The internal microphone on the camera picked up a whisper. The bailiff played the clip. The courtroom heard the rustle of fabric, and then Evan's voice, clear and conspiratorial. "Mom, did you turn the camera on? I am going in now." The judge looked up, his expression hardening into stone. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was a scene they had directed. Lena Kingsley took the stand next. Under the threat of perjury and with her own career in ashes, she didn't hesitate to burn them. "They told me the goal was to make her feel dirty," Lena testified, avoiding Evan's glare. "Marjorie said if we could make Brianna believe she had an STD, she would be too ashamed to fight for the assets. The plan was to force the signature and then liquidate the company to North Pine." "You traitor," Marjorie screamed from the defense table, leaping to her feet. "It was just a signature. It was just business. She didn't deserve that money." "Order," the judge bellowed, banging the gavel. Marjorie clamped her hand over her mouth, but the confession hung in the air, heavy and damning. She had admitted it. It wasn't about family or health. It was just a signature. The ruling came swiftly. The judge granted a permanent restraining order against both Evan and Marjorie. He also ordered the immediate transfer of the case files to the district attorney's office for charges related to fraud, extortion, and assault. I sat at the table one last time. The divorce papers were in front of me, alongside the corporate resolution that permanently barred Evan from the Hawthorne premises. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed my name in smooth, dark ink. I walked out of the courthouse into the biting cold of January. I was wearing a sharp black tailored suit. I didn't look back at the windows where I knew they were arguing with their lawyers. I didn't need their apologies. They thought the slap on Christmas would break me, that it would force me into the shadows. They didn't realize that the slap was just the switch that turned on the lights, revealing exactly who they were. And now, I was the only one left standing. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on the ending. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Victoria Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people.